They were taking a look at 10 red flags when investing in early stage startups, which, as you may know, are quite different from the companies that are listed on public markets. So you will need to have a different process on how you analyze them. And also, it's good to know what are some of the common problems that can occur so you avoid losing your money on them. I've created this list based on my own experience, the results, and also the mistakes that I've made when investing in over 30 startups and scale ups out of probably 500 more opportunities. And also, it contains information that I've got from other investors on how they do their own analysis of their own deals. The last one on this list is by far the worst one, but if you're going to invest your money in early stage startups, make sure that you watch until the end so you avoid losing your money on those red flags. First one that we're going to talk about is not closing deals with any new customers recently. I say recently because some companies will have longer sales cycles, which can affect to what this interval refers to. For example, if you're selling to Fortune 500 companies, banks, or even to the government, it can take months to a year to close a single deal, so you need to adjust that recently to exactly what is normally the sales cycle for that company. Taking a look at this together with how the competitors are doing can tell you a lot about the future potential of that company, because they might not be competitive in the market that they are in with their specific product. The second red flag that we are talking about are huge unjustifiable costs. And I'm not talking here about taking your team out for lunch every once in a while. That's perfectly fine, and I would even say that's a good sign. What will be for sure seen as a problem is spending $100,000 on building a company website with little to no reason for that. It just shows that you don't know how to handle the money, so why should any investor give it to you? Of course, that if you have an amazing product and you want to grow extremely fast, you will have to spend a lot of money on marketing, ads, and everything else. But you have to do it in a smart way. You have to spend the money to create value, not just throw it around. The next one is having too many co-founders, because the equity will be too diluted for them to actually have an incentive to work hard on the company. For a bigger company that's listed on the stock exchange, it would be normal for the CEO to only hold 5 to 10% of the company, but for a smaller startup, the valuation is too small for that. On a similar note, another red flag is having a messy cap table with too many people holding equity in the company. A small startup will need to move fast, and in order to do that, they will need to be able to make decisions fast. And with too many people on the cap table, it only becomes a problem making any major decisions. Big venture capital funds are always cautious about this aspect, so if a company has a messy cap table, it might stop them from raising funds in the future. This also applies to phantom equity, so people that were promised shares but are not yet on the cap table, because it can create a lot of legal problems. The next one is definitely not churn. Well, actually, that's exactly what it is. It's big churn, and especially within the first months of a new contract. A large percentage of customers churning is usually linked to the fact that the value of the product is not big enough to keep them there, or that the product itself might have a problem. But in both of those cases, it's hard to outrun the churn without huge demand. What I've seen happening with companies that were struggling with churn is that they will keep on growing until they reach a point where the number of new customers will be equal to the number of customers leaving, and they will start to stagnate and only burn money from that point. At one point, I was talking with another investor, and I believe he called them zombie companies, where they just keep going, sustaining salaries, but there's no growth happening, and you don't want your money to get stuck in those. Yes, if you think about it, churn is one of those problems that most of the time it can be solved with the proper resources and enough focus on it, but it's a long-winded process. But if you're going to invest in a high-risk opportunity, you will want all of the resources and the focus to be used towards growing your money, not putting out fires. And speaking about focus, another huge red flag is a team that's not fully dedicated to the company, especially the founders. If you have a full-time job and then you're working 4 hours on a project that's not a startup, that's a side hustle. And don't get me wrong, I love side hustles, and especially I love when people launch products to create additional revenue streams, but those are not opportunities that I'm willing to put my money behind. The next red flag is a valuation that's too big, because even if you have the most amazing product, the next OpenAI, it will make it way harder to raise another round in the future. At any point in time, something can happen which might affect your valuation. If you will need to raise more money to keep the company going, you might encounter a problem where the investors won't be willing to accept a down round. I've seen many companies that were once considered to be the next big tech unicorn in their sector, and now they are struggling to raise money because of those crazy valuations, or they have had to shut down because they've ran out of money before they could raise another round. The eighth red flag is accepting huge dilution, because that usually means that the founders have lost faith in the company or that they are desperate for money. There are investors that are specialized in saving struggling companies and turning them around, but those are very special cases and they have a lot of resources that they can leverage. For example, I've recently had a situation in one of the companies that I invested in through a convertible loan where we had to choose between converting it into equity or getting the money back. What was concerning for us as investors was that the conversion would be at 5 times the amount invested, which meant a lot of dilution for the founders. Getting 5 times the amount invested is good, I'm not complaining, but it also means that the company failed to grow enough to avoid this situation. So that's a red flag. We're nearly at the end, and the next red flag is a company having a lot of weird appendages. You want to invest in a company that has a good and simple product and it's focused on it, not revenue from consulting, implementation, and other activities. After a certain point, it can be good to have additional products that you can upsell to your customers, but that's only after you manage to grow the main product enough to cover the cost of the additional ones. Finally, we are at the end of this list, and here's the biggest red flag out of them all. It's founders talking shit. When a founder starts talking bad about his employees, the customers, or the domain that they are active in, that usually means that they've lost all passion for it, and that's the biggest red flag that you can find. When you invest in a company, you want to make sure that it's in the hands of someone that's passionate about it and that will go the extra mile to make sure that it will succeed. And that's the best way to de-risk your investment. And because you've stayed until the end, let me give you one more tip when you're analyzing a company. Make sure that the revenue is not coming only from 1 or 2 customers. Now, just as a reminder, this list doesn't cover everything that you need to analyze about the company. You still need to do a tech and legal due diligence and make sure that there are no other problems. Those are just some red flags that are not that obvious when you're starting with investing in early stage startups, so hopefully it will help you avoid losing your money. If you have learned anything new from this video, make sure to leave a like so I know that it has created value for you. And if you want to learn more about investing, you can check out the other videos that are being recommended right now or even subscribe for future content.